Tonight, you'll be dozing off from the backseat of your parents' car, softly cradled by the gentle hum of the engine as it travels homeward late at night along a country highway. Imagine you are sitting in the back seat with your head nestled into a cozy pillow propped against the window. You are gazing out at the moonlit countryside, and on your face is a soft and secret smile. It's late Friday night, after playing in the pep band at your brother's basketball game far from home. Your kid sister has nodded off already. She's laying across the wide seat with her head resting softly in your lap. You are tired too after a long week of high school and homework, but you're also full of wonder, and that smile on your face is perfectly concealed in the shadows, only illuminated sporadically by the flickering flashes of light cast from the headlights of oncoming cars. You rest your forehead against the cool glass of the window. Every now and then, a distant farmhouse light appears, towering like a lighthouse in the dark, casting bright beams across the endless, waterless ocean of a prairie. Now, slowly we'll begin to relax. First, with eyes closed, just become aware of your breathing, feeling your chest gently rise and fall again. Next, we'll try taking a few deeper breaths, filling our lungs with air, holding it, and then gently exhaling and letting it all go. Ready? Inhale deeply, hold for 3, 2, 1, and then exhale. One more time. Breathe in deeply, hold for 3, 2, 1, and then exhale. And try thinking to yourself, as I sit here in the back seat, I can feel gravity's pull tugging me gently back towards Earth. With every exhale, I can feel the weight of the day slipping away. I can feel my feet, my ankles, calves, knees, and my legs, each part of me relaxing deeper and becoming heavier and more relaxed. Up in the front seat, your parents recap and relive the big game. They talk of jump shots and fouls, rebounds and timeouts. You close your eyes, but when you picture the crowded gymnasium, you remember something much sweeter than basketball. Your mind drifts back, but now the memory of the night is soothing and hypnotic, somehow quieter, as if it all played out in slow motion. Sneakers squeaking on the hardwood floor, cheers blasting out from spirit sections choreographed by cheerleaders and mascots. The aroma of popcorn and hot dogs snaking its way from concessions all the way through the hot air, above the teams and players and referees, and then high into the packed stands where you and the band played and cheered and sang. You quietly reflect on how unexpected your first love appeared in your young life. It feels as if the universe brought it to you slowly, and yet, in the end, also unexpectedly in a flash. Now let's try taking a few more deep breaths. Ready? Breathe in deeply. Hold for 3, 2, 1, and then exhale. Try continuing on your own, and while doing this, try thinking to yourself, as I sit here, my whole body feels heavy and relaxed. With every exhale, I can feel gravity pulling me back towards Earth gently. I can feel my head, my shoulders, my neck becoming relaxed and at ease. And my legs are heavy and at peace with gravity's pull. Now my whole body, my legs and feet, my arms and hands, my torso, my head and neck and shoulders, my whole body is completely at peace, relaxed, and at ease. For weeks and weeks at band practice and at games, you had played right there next to each other, bumping elbows, close enough to catch quick flashes of fragrances, close enough for smiles, quick glances, silly and innocent flirtations without considering really when and where or if you might actually ever kiss. And then, unexpectedly, tonight, it just happened. while the whole gymnasium was on its feet, the whole world preoccupied with some monumental moment of a basketball game. It just happened right there in the minuscule universe between the two of you. When you think about it now, falling in love was a lot like those farmhouse lights out there in the darkness. Everything approached so slowly at first, off in the distance, hardly moving at all. And then, love gained momentum and approached you carefully and timidly, getting closer and closer, and before you knew it, before you both knew it, true love had rushed up on you in a heartbeat, irresistible and suddenly undeniable. You smile now, thinking how you had always imagined your first kiss would happen somewhere private and hidden, and yet, in the end, yours was out in the open and in front of hundreds of people who never even saw it. As your parents dial in the AM radio, you finally close your eyes and lean back. Sensible objects conform to the premonitions of reason and reflect the conscience. All things are moral, and in their boundless changes have an unceasing reference to spiritual nature. Therefore is nature glorious with form, color, and motion, that every globe in the remotest heaven, every chemical change from the rudest crystal up to the laws of life, every change of vegetation from the first principle of growth in the eye of a leaf to the tropical forest and antediluvian coal mine, every animal function from the sponge up to Hercules shall hint or thunder to man the laws of right and wrong and echo the 10 Commandments. Therefore is nature ever the ally of religion, lends all her pomp and riches to the religious sentiment. Prophet and priest, David, Isaiah, Jesus have drawn deeply from this source. This ethical character so penetrates the bone and marrow of nature as to seem the end for which it was made. Whatever private purpose is answered by any member or part, this is its public and universal function, and is never omitted. Nothing in nature is exhausted in its first use. When a thing has served an end to the uttermost, it is wholly new for an ulterior service. In God, every end is converted into a new means. Thus, the use of commodity, regarded by itself, is mean and squalid. But it is to the mind an education in the doctrine of use, namely, that a thing is good only so far as it serves, that a conspiring of parts and efforts to the production of an end is essential to any being. The first and gross manifestation of this truth is our inevitable and hated training in values and wants, in corn and meat. It has already been illustrated that every natural process is a version of a moral sentence. The moral law lies at the center of nature and radiates to the circumference. It is the pith and marrow of every substance, every relation, and every process. All things with which we deal preach to us. What is a farm but a mute gospel? The chaff and the wheat, weeds and plants, blight, rain, insects, sun. It is a sacred emblem from the first furrow of spring to the last stack which the snow of winter overtakes in the fields. But the sailor, the shepherd, the miner, the merchant, in their several resorts, have each an experience precisely parallel and leading to the same conclusion, because all organizations are radically alike. Nor can it be doubted that this moral sentiment, which thus scents the air, grows in the grain and impregnates the waters of the world, is caught by man and sinks into the soul. The moral influence of nature upon every individual is that amount of truth which it illustrates to him. Who can estimate this? Who can guess how much firmness the sea-beaten rock has taught the fisherman? How much tranquility has been reflected to man from the azure sky, over whose unspotted deeps the winds forevermore drive flocks of stormy clouds and leave no wrinkle or stain? How much industry and providence and affection we have caught from the pantomime of brutes? What a searching preacher of self-command is the varying phenomenon of health. Herein is especially apprehended the unity of nature, the unity in variety, which meets us everywhere. All the endless variety of things make an identical impression. Xenophanes complained in his old age that, look where he would, all things hastened back to unity. He was weary of seeing the same entity in the tedious variety of forms. The fable of Proteus has a cordial truth. A leaf, drop, crystal, a moment of time is related to the whole and partakes of the perfection of the whole. Each particle is a microcosm and faithfully renders the likeness of the world. Not only resemblances exist in things whose analogy is obvious, as when we detect the type of the human hand in the flipper of the fossil saurus, but also in objects wherein there is great superficial unlikeness. Thus, architecture is called frozen music by de Stael and Goethe. Vitruvius thought an architect should be a musician. A Gothic church, said Coleridge, is a petrified religion. Michelangelo maintained that, to an architect, a knowledge of anatomy is essential. In Haydn's oratorios, the notes present to the imagination not only motions as of the snake, the stag, and the elephant, but colors also, as the green grass. The law of harmonic sounds reappears in the harmonic colors. The granite is differenced in its laws only by the more or less of heat from the river that wears it away. The river, as it flows, resembles the air that flows over it. The air resembles the light which traverses it with more subtle currents. The light resembles the heat which rides with it through space. Each creature is only a modification of the other. The likeness in them is more than the difference, and their radical law is one and the same. A rule of one art or a law of one organization holds true throughout nature. So intimate is this unity that it is easily seen. It lies under the undermost garment of nature and betrays its source in universal spirit. For it pervades thought also. Every universal truth which we express in words implies or supposes every other truth. Omne verum vero consonant. It is like a great circle on a sphere, comprising all possible circles, which, however, may be drawn, and comprise it in like manner. Every such truth is the absolute ends seen from one side, but it has innumerable sides. The central unity is still more conspicuous in actions. Words are finite organs of the infinite mind. They cannot cover the dimensions of what is in truth. They break, chop, and impoverish it. And action is the perfection and publication of thought. A right action seems to fill the eye and to be related to all nature. The wise man, in doing one thing, does all, or in the one thing he does rightly, He sees the likeness of all which is done rightly. Words and actions are not the attributes of brute nature. They introduce us to the human form, of which all other organizations appear to be degradations. When this appears among so many that surround it, the Spirit prefers it to all others. It says, "From such as this have I drawn joy and knowledge, in such as this have I found and beheld myself. I will speak to it. It can speak again. It can yield me thought already formed and alive." In fact, the I, the mind, is always accompanied by these forms, male and female, and these are incomparably the richest informations of the power and order that lie at the heart of things. Unfortunately, every one of them bears the marks as of some injury, is marred and superficially defective. Nevertheless, far different from the deaf and dumb nature around them, these all rest like fountain pipes on the unfathomed sea of thought and virtue, whereto they alone, of all organizations, are the entrances. It were a pleasant inquiry to follow into detail their ministry to our education, but where would it stop? We are associated in adolescent and adult life with some friends who, like skies and waters, are coextensive with our idea, who, answering each to a certain affection of the soul, satisfy our desire on that side, whom we lack power to put at such focal distance from us that we can mend or even analyze them. We cannot choose but love them. When much intercourse with a friend has supplied us with a standard of excellence and has increased our respect for the resources of God, who thus sends a real person to outgo our ideal, when he has, moreover, become an object of thought, and whilst his character retains all its unconscious effect, is converted in the mind into solid and sweet wisdom, it is a sign to us that his office is closing, and he is commonly withdrawn from our sight in a short time. Chapter 6. Idealism. Thus is the unspeakable but intelligible and practicable meaning of the world conveyed to man, the immortal pupil, in every object of sense. To this one end of discipline, all parts of nature conspire. A noble doubt perpetually suggests itself whether this end be not the final cause of the universe, and whether nature outwardly exists. It is a sufficient account of that appearance we call the world, that God will teach a human mind, and so makes it the receiver of a certain number of congruent sensations, which we call sun and moon, man and woman, house and trade. In my utter impotence to test the authenticity of the report of my senses, to know whether the impressions they make on me correspond with outlying objects, what difference does it make whether Orion is up there in heaven or some god paints the image in the firmament of the soul? The relations of parts and the end of the whole remaining the same, what is the difference whether land and sea interact and worlds revolve and intermingle without number or end, deep yawning under deep and galaxy balancing galaxy throughout absolute space, or whether without relations of time and space the same appearances are inscribed in the constant faith of man? Whether nature enjoy a substantial existence without, or is only in the apocalypse of the mind, it is alike useful and alike venerable to me. Be it what it may, it is ideal to me, so long as I cannot try the accuracy of my senses. The frivolous make themselves merry with the ideal theory, as if its consequences were burlesque, as if it affected the stability of nature. It surely does not. God never jests with us and will not compromise the end of nature by permitting any inconsequence in its procession. Any distrust of the permanence of laws would paralyze the faculties of man. Their permanence is sacredly respected, and his faith therein is perfect. The wheels and springs of man are all set to the hypothesis of the permanence of nature. We are not built like a ship to be tossed, but like a house to stand. It is a natural consequence of this structure that, so long as the active powers predominate over the reflective, we resist with indignation any hint that nature is more short-lived or mutable than spirit. The broker, the wheelwright, the carpenter, the toll man are much displeased at the intimation. But whilst we acquiesce entirely in the permanence of natural laws, the question of the absolute existence of nature still remains open. It is the uniform effect of culture on the human mind not to shake our faith in the stability of particular phenomena, as of heat, water, azote, but to lead us to regard nature as a phenomenon, not a substance, to attribute necessary existence to spirit, to esteem nature as an accident and an effect. To the senses and the unrenewed understanding belongs a sort of instinctive belief in the absolute existence of nature. In their view, man and nature are indissolubly joined. Things are ultimates, and they never look beyond their sphere. The presence of reason mars this faith. The first effort of thought tends to relax this despotism of the senses, which binds us to nature as if we were a part of it, and shows us nature aloof and, as it were, afloat. Until this higher agency intervened, the animal eye sees with wonderful accuracy sharp outlines and colored surfaces. When the eye of reason opens, to outline and surface are at once added grace and expression. These proceed from imagination and affection and abate somewhat of the angular distinctness of objects. If the reason be stimulated to more earnest vision, outlines and surfaces become transparent and are no longer seen. Causes and spirits are seen through them. The best moments of life are these delicious awakenings of the higher powers and the reverential withdrawing of nature before its God. Let us proceed to indicate the effects of culture. 1. Our first institution in the ideal philosophy is a hint from nature herself. Nature is made to conspire with spirit to emancipate us. Certain mechanical changes, a small alteration in our local position, apprises us of a dualism. We are strangely affected by seeing the shore from a moving ship, from a balloon, or through the tints of an unusual sky. The least change in our point of view gives the whole world a pictorial air. A man who seldom rides needs only to get into a coach and traverse his own ground and turn the street into a puppet show. The men, the women, talking, running, bartering, fighting, the earnest mechanic, the lounger, the beggar, the boys, the dogs, are unrealized at once, or at least wholly detached from all relation to the observer, and seen as apparent, not substantial beings. What new thoughts are suggested by seeing a face of country quite familiar in the rapid movement of the railroad car? Nay, the most wonted objects make a very slight change in the point of vision, please us most. In a camera obscura, the butcher's cart and the figure of one of our own family amuse us. So a portrait of a well-known face gratifies us. Turn the eyes upside down by looking at the landscape through your legs, and how agreeable is the picture, though you have seen it any time these 20 years. In these cases, by mechanical means, is suggested the difference between the observer and the spectacle, between man and nature. Hence arises a pleasure mixed with awe. I may say a low degree of the sublime is felt from the fact, probably, that man is hereby apprised that, whilst the world is a spectacle, something in himself is stable. 2. In a higher manner, the poet communicates the same pleasure. By a few strokes he delineates, as on air, the sun, the mountain, the camp, the city, the hero, the maiden, not different from what we know them, but only lifted from the ground and afloat before the eye. He unfixes the land and the sea, makes them revolve around the axis of his primary thought, and disposes them anew. Possessed himself by a heroic passion, he uses matter as symbols of it. The sensual man conforms thoughts to things. The poet conforms things to his thoughts. The one esteems nature as rooted and vast, the other as fluid, and impresses his being thereon. To him, the refractory world is ductile and flexible. He invests dust and stones with humanity and makes them the words of the reason. The imagination may be defined to be the use which the reason makes of the material world. Shakespeare possesses the power of subordinating nature for the purposes of expression beyond all poets. His imperial muse tosses the creation like a bauble from hand to hand, and uses it to embody any caprice of thought that is uppermost in his mind. The remotest spaces of nature are visited, and the farthest sundered things are brought together by a subtle spiritual connection. We are made aware that magnitude of material things is relative, and all objects shrink and expand to serve the passion of the poet. Thus, in his sonnets, the lays of birds, the scents and dyes of flowers, he finds to be the shadow of his beloved. Time, which keeps her from him, is his chest. The suspicion she has awakened is her ornament. The ornament of beauty is suspect, a crow which flies in heaven's sweetest air. His passion is not the fruit of chance. It swells as he speaks to a city or a state. No, it was builded far from accident. It suffers not in smiling pomp, nor falls under the brow of thralling discontent. It fears not policy, that heretic, that works on leases of short-numbered hours, but all alone stands hugely politic. In the strength of his constancy, the pyramids seem to him recent and transitory. The freshness of youth and love dazzles him with its resemblance to morning. Take those lips away, which so sweetly were forsworn, and those eyes, the break of day, lights that do mislead the morn. The wild beauty of this hyperbole, I may say, in passing, it would not be easy to match in literature. This transfiguration which all material objects undergo through the passion of the poet, this power which he exerts to dwarf the great, to magnify the small, might be illustrated by 1,000 examples from his plays. I have before me The Tempest, and will cite only these few lines. Ariel, the strong, based promontory, have I made shake, and by the spurs plucked up, the pine and cedar. Prospero calls for music to soothe the frantic Alonso and his companions, a solemn air and the best comforter. To an unsettled fancy, cure thy brains, now useless, boiled within thy skull. Again the charm dissolves apace, and, as the morning steals upon the night, melting the darkness, So their rising senses begin to chase the ignorant fumes that mantle. Their clearer reason, their understanding, begins to swell, and the approaching tide will shortly fill the reasonable shores that now lie foul and muddy. The perception of real affinities between events, that is to say, of ideal affinities for those only are real, enables the poet thus to make free with the most imposing forms and phenomena of the world, and to assert the predominance of the soul. 3. Whilst thus the poet animates nature with his own thoughts, he differs from the philosopher only herein, that the one proposes beauty as his main end, the other truth. But the philosopher, not less than the poet, postpones the apparent order and relations of things to the empire of thought. The problem of philosophy, according to Plato, is, for all that exists conditionally, to find a ground unconditioned and absolute. It proceeds on the faith that a law determines all phenomena, which being known, the phenomena can be predicted. That law, when in the mind, is an idea. Its beauty is infinite. The true philosopher and the true poet are one, and a beauty, which is truth, and a truth, which is beauty, is the aim of both. Is not the charm of one of Plato's or Aristotle's definitions strictly like that of the Antigone of Sophocles? It is, in both cases, that a spiritual life has been imparted to nature, that the solid seeming block of matter has been pervaded and dissolved by a thought, that this feeble human being has penetrated the vast masses of nature with an informing soul, and recognized itself in their harmony, that is, seized their law. In physics, when this is attained, the memory disburthens itself of its cumbrous catalogues of particulars, and carries centuries of observation in a single formula. Thus, even in physics, the material is degraded before the spiritual. The astronomer, the geometer, rely on their irrefragable analysis and disdain the results of observation. The sublime remark of Euler on his law of arches, "This will be found contrary to all experience, yet is true," had already transferred nature into the mind, and left matter like an outcast corpse. 4th, intellectual science has been observed to beget invariably a doubt of the existence of matter. Turgot said, "He that has never doubted the existence of matter may be assured he has no aptitude for metaphysical inquiries. It fastens the attention upon immortal, necessary, uncreated natures, that is, upon ideas, and in their presence we feel that the outward circumstance is a dream and a shade. Whilst we wait in this Olympus of gods, we think of nature as an appendix to the soul. We ascend into their region and know that these are the thoughts of the Supreme Being. These are they who were set up from everlasting, from the beginning, or ever the earth was. When he prepared the heavens, they were there. When he established the clouds above, when he strengthened the fountains of the deep, then they were by him, as one brought up with him. Of them took he counsel. Their influence is proportionate. As objects of science, they are accessible to few men, yet all men are capable of being raised by piety or by passion into their region, and no man touches these divine natures without becoming, in some degree, himself divine. Like a new soul, they renew the body. We become physically nimble and lightsome. We tread on air. Life is no longer irksome, and we think it will never be so. No man fears age or misfortune or death in their serene company, for he is transported out of the district of change. Whilst we behold unveiled the nature of justice and truth, we learn the difference between the absolute and the conditional or relative. We apprehend the absolute. As it were, for the first time, we exist. We become immortal, for we learn that time and space are relations of matter, that with a perception of truth or a virtuous will, they have no affinity. 5. Finally, religion and ethics, which may be fitly called the practice of ideas, or the introduction of ideas into life, have an analogous effect with all lower culture, in degrading nature and suggesting its dependence on spirit. Ethics and religion differ herein, that the one is the system of human duties commencing from man, the other from God. Religion includes the personality of God, ethics does not. They are one to our present design. They both put nature underfoot. The first and last lesson of religion is, the things that are seen are temporal, the things that are unseen are eternal. It puts an affront upon nature. It does that for the unschooled, which philosophy does for Berkeley and Piazza. The uniform language that may be heard in the churches of the most ignorant sects is, contemn the unsubstantial shows of the world. They are vanities, dreams, shadows, unrealities. Seek the realities of religion. The devotee flouts nature. Some theosophists have arrived at a certain hostility and indignation towards matter as the Manichaean and Platonists. They distrusted in themselves any looking back to these flesh pots of Egypt. Plotinus was ashamed of his body. In short, they might all say of matter what Michelangelo said of external beauty. It is the frail and weary weed in which God dresses the soul, which he has called into time. It appears that motion, poetry, physical and intellectual science and religion all tend to affect our convictions of the reality of the external world. But I own there is something ungrateful in expanding too curiously the particulars of the general proposition that all culture tends to imbue us with idealism. I have no hostility to nature, but a child's love to it. I expand and live in the warm day like corn and melons. Let us speak her fair. I do not wish to fling stones at my beautiful mother, nor soil my gentle nest. I only wish to indicate the true position of nature in regard to man, wherein to establish man all right education tends, as the ground which to attain is the object of human life, that is, of man's connection with nature. Culture inverts the vulgar views of nature and brings the mind to call that apparent, which it uses to call real, and that real, which it uses to call visionary. Children, it is true, believe in the external world. The belief that it appears only is an afterthought, but with culture, this faith will as surely arise on the mind as did the first. The advantage of the ideal theory over the popular faith is this, that it presents the world in precisely that view which is most desirable to the mind. It is, in fact, the view which reason, both speculative and practical, that is, philosophy and virtue, take. For seen in the light of thought, the world always is phenomenal, and virtue subordinates it to the mind. Idealism sees the world in thought. It beholds the whole circle of persons and things, of actions and events, of country and religion, not as painfully accumulated, atom for atom, act after act, in an aged, creeping past, but as one vast picture which God paints on the instant eternity for the contemplation of the soul. Therefore the soul holds itself off from a too trivial microscopic study of the universal tablet. It respects the end too much to immerse itself in the means. It sees something more important in Christianity than the scandals of ecclesiastical history or the niceties of criticism, and very incurious concerning persons or miracles, and not at all disturbed by chasms of historical evidence. It accepts from God the phenomenon as it finds it, as the pure and awful form of religion in the world. It is not hot and passionate at the appearance of what it calls its own good or bad fortune, at the union or opposition of others. No man is its enemy. It accepts whatsoever befalls as part of its lesson. It is a watcher more than a doer, and it is a doer, only that it may the better watch. Chapter 7. Spirit. It is essential to a true theory of nature and of man that it should contain somewhat progressive uses that are exhausted or that may be, and facts that end in the statement cannot be all that is true of this brave lodging wherein man is harbored, and wherein all his faculties find appropriate and endless exercise, and all the uses of nature admit of being summed in one, which yields the activity of man an infinite scope. Through all its kingdoms to the suburbs and outskirts of things, it is faithful to the cause whence it had its origin. It always speaks of spirit. It suggests the absolute. It is a perpetual effect. It is a great shadow pointing always to the sun behind us. The aspect of nature is devout. Like the figure of Jesus, she stands with bended head and hands folded upon the breast. The happiest man is he who learns from nature the lesson of worship, of that ineffable essence which we call spirit. He that thinks most will say least. We can foresee God in the coarse and, as it were, distant phenomena of matter. But when we try to define and describe himself, both language and thought desert us, and we are as helpless as fools and savages. That essence refuses to be recorded in propositions, but when man has worshipped him intellectually, the noblest ministry of nature is to stand as the apparition of God. It is the organ through which the universal spirit speaks to the individual and strives to lead back the individual to it. When we consider spirit, we see that the views already presented do not include the whole circumference of man. We must add some related thoughts. 3 problems are put by nature to the mind. What is matter? Whence is it? And where to? The first of these questions only, the ideal theory answers, Idealism saith, matter is a phenomenon, not a substance. Idealism acquaints us with the total disparity between the evidence of our own being and the evidence of the world's being. The one is perfect, the other incapable of any assurance. The mind is a part of the nature of things. The world is a divine dream from which we may presently awake to the glories and certainties of day. Idealism is a hypothesis to account for nature by other principles than those of carpentry and chemistry. Yet, if it only deny the existence of matter, it does not satisfy the demands of the spirit. It leaves God out of me. It leaves me in the splendid labyrinth of my perceptions, to wander without end. Then the heart resists because it balks the affections in denying substantive being to men and women. Nature is so pervaded with human life that there is something of humanity in all and in every particular. But this theory makes nature foreign to me and does not account for that consanguinity which we acknowledge to it. Let it stand then in the present state of our knowledge, merely as a useful introductory hypothesis, serving to apprise us of the eternal distinction between the soul and the world. But when, following the invisible steps of thought, we come to inquire, whence is matter and where to? Many truths arise to us out of the recesses of consciousness. We learn that the highest is present to the soul of man, that the dread universal essence, which is not wisdom or love or beauty or power, but all in one and each entirely, is that for which all things exist and that by which they are. That spirit creates. That behind nature, throughout nature, spirit is present, one and not compound. It does not act upon us from without, that is, in space and time, but spiritually, or through ourselves. Therefore, that spirit, that is, the Supreme Being, does not build up nature around us, but puts it forth through us, as the life of the tree puts forth new branches and leaves through the pores of the old. As a plant upon the earth, so a man rests upon the bosom of God. He is nourished by unfailing fountains and draws, at his need, inexhaustible power. Who can set bounds to the possibilities of man? Once inhale the upper air, being admitted to behold the absolute natures of justice and truth, and we learn that man has access to the entire mind of the Creator, is himself the creator in the finite. This view, which admonishes me where the sources of wisdom and power lie, and points to virtue as to the golden key, which opes the palace of eternity, carries upon its face the highest certificate of truth, because it animates me to create my own world through the purification of my soul. The world proceeds from the same spirit as the body of man. It is a remoter and inferior incarnation of God, a projection of God in the unconscious. But it differs from the body in one important respect. It is not, like that, now subjected to the human will. Its serene order is inviolable by us. It is, therefore, to us, the present expositor of the divine mind. It is a fixed point whereby we may measure our departure. As we degenerate, the contrast between us and our house is more evident. We are as much strangers in nature as we are aliens from God. We do not understand the notes of birds. The fox and the deer run away from us. The bear and tiger rend us. We do not know the uses of a few plants, as corn and the apple, the potato and the vine. Is not the landscape, every glimpse of which hath a grandeur, a face of him? Yet this may show us what discord is between man and nature, for you cannot freely admire a noble landscape if laborers are digging in the field hard by. The poet finds something ridiculous in his delight until he is out of the sight of men. Chapter 8, Prospects. In inquiries respecting the laws of the world and the frame of things, the highest reason is always the truest. That which seems faintly possible, it is so refined, is often faint and dim, because it is deepest seated in the mind among the eternal verities. Empirical science is apt to cloud the sight, and by the very knowledge of functions and processes, to bereave the student of the manly contemplation of the whole. The savant becomes unpoetic. But the best read naturalist who lends an entire and devout attention to truth will see that there remains much to learn of his relation to the world, and that it is not to be learned by any addition or subtraction or other comparison of known quantities, but is arrived at by untaught sallies of the spirit, by a continual self-recovery, and by entire humility. He will perceive that there are far more excellent qualities in the student than preciseness and infallibility, that a guess is often more fruitful than an indisputable affirmation, and that a dream may let us deeper into the secret of nature than 100 concerted experiments. For the problems to be solved are precisely those which the physiologist and the naturalist omit to state. It is not so pertinent to man to know all the individuals of the animal kingdom as it is to know whence and where to is this tyrannizing unity in his constitution, which evermore separates and classifies things, endeavoring to reduce the most diverse to one form. When I behold a rich landscape, it is less to my purpose to recite correctly the order and superposition of the strata than to know why all thought of multitude is lost in a tranquil sense of unity. I cannot greatly honor minuteness in details so long as there is no hint to explain the relation between things and thoughts, no ray upon the metaphysics of conchology, of botany, of the arts, to show the relation of the forms of flowers, shells, animals, architecture to the mind, and build science upon ideas. In a cabinet of natural history, we become sensible of a certain occult recognition and sympathy in regard to the most unwieldy and eccentric forms of beast, fish, and insect. The American who has been confined in his own country to the sight of buildings designed after foreign models is surprised on entering York Minster or St. Peter's at Rome by the feeling that these structures are imitations also, faint copies of an invisible archetype. Nor has science sufficient humanity, so long as the naturalist overlooks that wonderful congruity which subsists between man and the world, of which he is lord, not because he is the most subtile inhabitant, but because he is its head and heart, and finds something of himself in every great and small thing, in every mountain stratum, in every new law of color, fact of astronomy or atmospheric influence, which observation or analysis lay open. A perception of this mystery inspires the muse of George Herbert, the beautiful psalmist of the 17th century. The following lines are part of his little poem on man. Man is all symmetry, full of proportions, one limb to another, and to all the world besides. Each part may call the farthest brother, for head with foot hath private amity, and both with moons and tides. Nothing hath got so far, but man hath caught and kept it as his prey. His eyes dismount the highest star. He is in little all the sphere. Herbs gladly cure our flesh, because that they find their acquaintance there. For us the winds do blow, the earth doth rest, heaven move, and fountains flow. Nothing we see but means our good, as our delight or as our treasure. The whole is either our cupboard of food or cabinet of pleasure. The stars have us to bed. Night draws the curtain which the sun withdraws. Music and light attend our head. All things unto our flesh are kind in their descent and being, to our mind in their ascent and cause. More servants wait on man than he'll take notice of. In every path he treads down that which doth befriend him. When sickness makes him pale and wan, O mighty love, man is one world and hath another to attend him. The perception of this class of truths makes the attraction which draws men to science, but the end is lost sight of in attention to the means. In view of this half-sight of science, we accept the sentence of Plato that poetry comes nearer to vital truth than history. Every surmise and vaticination of the mind is entitled to a certain respect, and we learn to prefer imperfect theories and sentences which contain glimpses of truth to digested systems which have no one valuable suggestion. A wise writer will feel that the ends of study and composition are best answered by announcing undiscovered regions of thought, and so communicating through hope new activity to the torpid spirit. I shall therefore conclude this essay with some traditions of man and nature which a certain poet sang to me, and which, as they have always been in the world, and perhaps reappear to every bard, may be both history and prophecy. The foundations of man are not in matter, but in spirit, but the element of spirit is eternity. To it, therefore, the longest series of events, the oldest chronologies, are young and recent. In the cycle of the universal man, from whom the known individuals proceed, centuries are points, and all history is but the epoch of one degradation. We distrust and deny inwardly our sympathy with nature. We own and disown our relation to it by turns. We are, like Nebuchadnezzar, dethroned, bereft of reason, and eating grass like an ox, but who can set limits to the remedial force of spirit? A man is a god in ruins. When men are innocent, life shall be longer, and shall pass into the immortal, as gently as we awake from dreams. Now, the world would be insane and rabid if these disorganizations should last for hundreds of years. It is kept in check by death and infancy. Infancy is the perpetual Messiah, which comes into the arms of fallen men and pleads with them to return to paradise. Man is the dwarf of himself. Once he was permeated and dissolved by spirit, he filled nature with his overflowing currents. Out from him sprang the sun and moon. From man, the sun. From woman, the moon. The laws of his mind, the periods of his actions, externized themselves into day and night, into the year and the seasons. But, having made for himself this huge shell, his waters retired. He no longer fills the veins and veinlets. He is shrunk to a drop. He sees that the structure still fits him, but fits him colossally. Say rather, once it fitted him, now it corresponds to him from far and on high. He adores timidly his own work. Now is man the follower of the sun, and woman the follower of the moon. Yet sometimes he starts in his slumber, and wonders at himself and his house, and muses strangely at the resemblance betwixt him and it. He perceives that if his law is still paramount, if still he have elemental power, if his word is sterling yet in nature, it is not conscious power. It is not inferior, but superior to his will. It is instinct. Thus my Orphic poet sang. At present, man applies to nature but half his force. He works on the world with his understanding alone. He lives in it and masters it by a penny wisdom. And he that works most in it is but a half man. And whilst his arms are strong and his digestion good, his mind is imbruted, and he is a selfish savage. His relation to nature, his power over it, is through the understanding, as by manure, the economic use of fire, wind, water, and the mariner's needle, steam, coal, chemical agriculture, the repairs of the human body by the dentist and the surgeon. This is such a resumption of power, as if a banished king should buy his territories inch by inch, instead of vaulting at once into his throne. Meantime, in the thick darkness, there are not gleams of a better light, occasional examples of the action of man upon nature with his entire force, with reason as well as understanding. Such examples are the traditions of miracles in the earliest antiquity of all nations, the history of Jesus Christ, the achievements of a principle as in religious and political revolutions, and in the abolition of the slave trade, the miracles of enthusiasm as those reported of Swedenborg, Hohenlohe, and the Shakers, many obscure and yet contested facts, now arranged under the name of animal magnetism, prayer, eloquence, self-healing, and the wisdom of children. These are examples of reason's momentary grasp of the scepter, the exertions of a power which exists not in time or space, but an instantaneous in-streaming causing power. The problem of restoring to the world original and eternal beauty is solved by the redemption of the soul. The ruin or the blank that we see when we look at nature is in our own eye. The axis of vision is not coincident with the axis of things, and so they appear not transparent, but opaque. The reason why the world lacks unity and lies broken and in heaps is because man is disunited with himself. He cannot be a naturalist until he satisfies all the demands of the spirit. Love is as much its demand as perception. Indeed, neither can be perfect without the other. In the uttermost meaning of the words, thought is devout, and devotion is thought. Deep calls unto deep. But in actual life, the marriage is not celebrated. There are innocent men who worship God after the tradition of their fathers, but their sense of duty has not yet extended to the use of all their faculties. And there are patient naturalists, but they freeze their subject understanding. Is not prayer also a study of truth, a sally of the soul into the unfound infinite? No man ever prayed heartily without learning something. But when a faithful thinker, resolute to detach every object from personal relations and see it in the light of thought, shall at the same time kindle science with the fire of the holiest affections, then will God go forth anew into the creation. It will not need, when the mind is prepared for study, to search for objects. The invariable mark of wisdom is to see the miraculous in the common. What is a day? What is a year? What is summer? What is woman? What is a child? What is sleep? To our blindness, these things seem unaffecting. We make fables to hide the baldness of the fact and conform it, as we say, to the higher law of the mind. But when the fact is seen under the light of an idea, the gaudy fable fades and shrivels. We behold the real higher law. To the wise, therefore, a fact is true poetry and the most beautiful of fables. These wonders are brought to our own door. You also are a man, man and woman, and their social life, poverty, labor, sleep, fear, fortune are known to you. Learn that none of these things is superficial, but that each phenomenon has its roots in the faculties and affections of the mind. Whilst the abstract question occupies your intellect, nature brings it in the concrete to be solved by your hands. It were a wise inquiry for the closet to compare, point by point, especially at remarkable crises in life, our daily history, with the rise and progress of ideas in the mind. So shall we come to look at the world with new eyes. It shall answer the endless inquiry of the intellect, what is truth, and of the affections, what is good, by yielding itself passive to the educated will. Then shall come to pass what my poet said, nature is not fixed but fluid. Spirit alters, molds, makes it. The immobility or bruteness of nature is the absence of spirit. To pure spirit, it is fluid, it is volatile, it is obedient. Every spirit builds itself a house, and beyond its house, a world, and beyond its world, a heaven. Know then that the world exists for you. For you is the phenomenon perfect. What we are, that only can we see. All that Adam had, all that Caesar could, you have and can do. Adam called his house heaven and earth. Caesar called his house Rome. You perhaps call yours a cobbler's trade, 100 acres of plowed land, or a scholar's garret. Line for line and point for point, your dominion is as great as theirs, though without fine names. Build, therefore, your own world. As fast as you conform your life to the pure idea in your mind, that will unfold its great proportions. A correspondent revolution in things will attend the influx of the Spirit. So fast will disagreeable appearances, swine, spiders, snakes, pests, madhouses, prisons, enemies vanish. They are temporary and shall be no more seen. The sordor and filths of nature, the sun shall dry up and the wind exhale. As when the summer comes from the south, the snowbanks melt, and the face of the earth becomes green before it, so shall the advancing spirit create its ornaments along its path, and carry with it the beauty it visits, and the song which enchants it. It shall draw beautiful faces, warm hearts, wise discourse, and heroic acts around its way, until evil is no more seen. The kingdom of man over nature, which cometh not with observation, a dominion such as now is beyond his dream of God. He shall enter without more wonder than the blind man feels who is gradually restored to perfect